What's going on, guys? Welcome to Straight Talk with Jon Brunson. All right, let's see what my guys have for me today. Okay, so we've got Sam Klein. Sam Klein from Mississippi. He's asking an array of things. He'd like me to discuss gear and equipment, must-haves for a successful deer hunt. He'd like me to discuss essential gear, including rifles, bows, camouflage clothing, hunting accessories, exploring tips for choosing the right equipment and maintaining it for optimal performance, practicing and shooting bow and gun, and snacks and water. All right, so a lot of stuff to talk about here. Okay. All right. Okay, as far as essential gear including rifles, bows, camouflage clothing, hunting accessories. Okay, well, I mean that's a lot. Look, when it comes to equipment, first and foremost, you've got to figure out something that works within your budget. There's a lot of great stuff out there, and there's again, if you if you can afford to go out and buy the gun you want, the bow you want, that's great. Not everybody can do that, especially with all the craziness that's been going on in this world and country lately. But I mean, I can tell you this, you take a top bow that someone's had for a year, two or three, and all of a sudden they're selling it online, eBay, wherever. I mean, you go buy a $1,600 bow or a $1,200 bow for $200. So, and that bow will last you a lifetime. So, there's whether you're buying a brand new gun or bow, or especially on the bow side, or whether you're buying something used, there's a lot of good stuff out there. As far as, again, there's not a specific question like related to caliber, this, that, and the other, and we're obviously talking about deer hunting because you want to know about deer hunting specific. But there's a lot of great calibers out there. I would say the things that we've learned over the years is it really doesn't matter what brand the gun is or the bow is, as much as are you comfortable with it? Can you shoot it? I mean, I've seen guys pick up top bows that they just cannot shoot it. It just doesn't fit. It just doesn't work for them. They go to a different brand and they smash it. Same thing with guns. Same things with optics. The thing that's most important is accuracy, right? And being able to make the shot that you need to make. That's first and foremost. So when it comes to guns, bows, there's a lot of great stuff out there, a lot of great manufacturers. On the bow side, we work with Obsession. Love the company. Just an insane shooting bow. And we really enjoy shooting them. We've obviously, I've bowed it all my life. I got my first bow. I got my first recurve, I think, when I was like 7. I got my first compound when I was 8. I remember it's from the archery shop that's still open today. It was a Bear Whitetail 2. Man, that was my first compound bow. I think that was, a lot of people my age, I think that was, everyone's first bow. We've shot a lot of stuff out there, a lot of great companies, a lot of great stuff. We shoot Obsession because it's always a question we get. Well, what do you shoot? We shoot Obsession bows. Really enjoy them. Great company. Phenomenal bow. So, being comfortable and being accurate is the most important thing. When it comes to guns, I can tell you just some tips, that we've definitely learned over the years. The best recoil pad, and I've got a long story of how I tested this that I'm not going to get into, with a buddy of mine who broke his neck 3 times. Like my dad said, if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. But a good buddy of mine, broke his neck 3 different times. And so, we went through this whole ordeal of testing recoil pads, and we were testing them with a custom gun I had built, and I'm going back 20 plus years, but it was what was it? Trying to remember. Big caliber gun. I can't remember, but it was a cannon, and it would kick the snot out of you. So anyway, by practicing with that, because he shot it one time, it's like, I'm never shooting that gun again. And then we started experimenting with recoil pads, and then I found a recoil pad that like changed the game, and I've talked him into shooting it again. Took me forever, and once he shot it, he's like, oh my gosh, and he shot it 2 more times. So I can tell you the best recoil pad on the market. I've tested most of what's out there. I'm sure there's been new stuff come out. But in my opinion, the most amazing, recoil pad on the planet is made by Limb Saber. I got to know those guys, years after I started shooting that pad. I got to know those guys, and, I got to know Steve, who owns the company, who was this, crazy mad scientist, that, had all these patents and created this rubber material. Like he invented it, right? He created it from like a molecular level. Like I can't explain it, but it's like he created this, this vibration absorbing material that obviously he built a company on it. So I'd say recoil pad, Limb Saber recoil pad, you can't beat them. And then, of course, we, about 7 years ago or so, we finally started shooting suppressed. And oh my gosh, suppressed changed our lives. It's, when we started shooting suppressed, number one, no hearing protection. Number two, it cuts recoil in half. Number three, it doesn't put pressure on the woods. One of the reasons why we've loved bow hunting so much is you just don't pressure the woods. You're out there blasting a cannon through the woods, during hunting season. It's different than, shooting a deer with a bow. So, it's less pressure. Again, cut your recoil in half. You gotta worry about your hearing protection. If you're shooting something suppressed that's, got low enough for you, which the stuff that we shoot, it's well underneath the level where you need earplugs. And I'd say the other thing about shooting suppressed is what an insane difference it made with the kids. A lot of people think, and I'd say in the early days, I'd say the same thing. Well, with kids, it's recoil. I think with kids, it's more the boom and the percussion they feel as much as recoil. And I can tell you, with our kids, when they were younger, we could put them on a bench to shoot their guns. Hey, let's check your gun, make sure it's good for your trip. They were shooting it with a Limb Saber pad and a brake on the front to just try and reduce recoil. Of course, with a brake, it's, even louder, and you could just feel that percussion kicking off. And our kids would shoot, they'd shoot 1, 2, 3 times, make sure it was on, and they were done. Once we went suppressed, you couldn't get them off the bench. They'd sit there and go through boxes of ammunition. So for us, there's a lot of reasons why, we shoot suppressed. People think it's really difficult, like, oh man, everyone thinks it's, suppressed. Oh, it's, the movies, you're an assassin, you're just going to kill people, all this stuff. I don't sell suppressors for a living. I'm not up to speed on everything, but I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure at this point they're legal in every state, but I want to say 2, maybe it's 3. And I'll tell you, the process is easy. It's like going in and buying a gun. And now recently went to a digital system, because for years, you'd have to order your suppressor and pay for it, and you may wait 6, 8 months or a year to get everything done. Now, there's guys getting suppressors, in 30 days with this new digital system. So, they're easy to buy. You can put them in your personal name or a trust. A trust is, in my opinion, the way to go. I think we set up our trust for like $90. And there's a lot of suppressor companies out there where you can literally just go to their website, and they walks you right through it. So buying suppressors and owning suppressors is very easy. I can tell you that Gina and I have traveled all over the country with a gun in a hard case with a suppressor. And we have traveled all over the country for probably 7 years with suppressors. And not one time have we ever even been questioned, like, what is that? Or, oh, do you have your paperwork for that? Of course, we had our paperwork for it, but, hey, not one time. So traveling, Obviously there's a few states, you start talking about Illinois and Chicago and stuff, you got to know there's certain areas where like you're not driving through there with a gun, or a pistol, period. So, but for the most part, man, traveling and flying, no hassles, and getting it's easy. They're not crazy expensive like a lot of people would think. And they're just fun, they're fun. You get a little 22 setup with it, and it's making hardly no noise, and they're plinking little metal targets with the kids. I mean, it's, that's definitely been a kind of a game changer for us on the hunting side. And again, when I mention no pressure, when I say there's no pressure, like, we'll shoot a deer, and there'll be 10 deer out there, and we'll shoot a deer, and the other deer stand there. They don't go nowhere. I mean, we've been in Texas where we shot a buck and literally was like, oh man, I've never shot a big javelina. There's a big javelina there, but it's like, okay, well, I'm shooting that buck first, because in the past, that's why I'd never shot my big javelina. I'd always see, I'm hunting a deer and I want to get that deer down. Well, shooting suppressed, I mean, I remember at the Marisol with Raven, she shot a buck, we switched places, I shot a buck, and then I rolled over and shot a big old javelina, and that was just because we were shooting suppressed. So on the gun side, I guess that's some of my tips. Optics, I'm an optics snob, only because we went through a rash similar to trail cameras early in our careers. We went through a few brands of optics that just crushed us. Like they let us down, right? And just fogging all the time, just reticles breaking loose. Like I remember with a rifle in Nebraska one year, giant mule deer, put a great stalk on him, 100-yard shot. And I mean, he was standing against a dirt bank that was, about 10 foot high. And I mean, 100-yard shot, and I pull the trigger. I'm on a rest. I'm on a bag. I mean, I shoot. Thing hits 3 feet over the top of his back. I'm like, what in the world's going on here? This is a ways back, early days, so no suppressor. The deer boogie's on. He's gone. Go back to camp. Start shooting. Things all over the place. So we finally figured out we had a floating reticle that had broke loose in the scope. So with optics, like I said, man, you pick up a gun and you can shoot that gun accurately. Okay, you're good to go. Optics, it's just a little different ball game. So I would say with optics, the thing is, I'd put my money into better optics before I would a gun, because it doesn't matter how good that gun is and how accurate that gun is. If your optics aren't, you're done. What do we personally shoot Husqvarna, amazing company. They have a proprietary system. They specialize in long distance shooting. Everything's super simple, but the optics have been amazing. Again, we've got backstories of how optics have crushed our hunts and cost us money. I've got a long story of why I went with Husqvarna that I won't get into because it's a long story, but just got so frustrated. Short version, told like our agent at the time, we don't want an optics company. I'm going to just buy what I want and shoot what I want. Asked several friends of mine that were really top gun guys, and they were like, Husqvarna. I'm like, I've never heard of them. He's like, well, it's funny. If you're a serious long distance shooter, you've heard of them, and if you're not, you haven't. And so I just called them up, or had my office call them up. I didn't want them to know who we were. We bought two. We tried them out, and we never looked back. And they're just, just holding up clarity, no fog, accuracy, durability. So I'm not saying you got to go buy a Husqvarna. I'm just saying optics are really important when it comes to your gear. The bows to me are going to fall, into a little less extreme category as optics. They're going to be more with the gun. I mean, you get a bow. Look, if you can shoot that bow, if your effective range is 30, 20 yards or 30 yards or whatever it is, and you can shoot that bow accurately and you're comfortable. I mean, again, Gary Zumwalt co-hosts Spirit Life with me. He used to drive me crazy back in the day because, even early before TV, like me and Gina were into it, right? So we're out there, we got our matching camos, we got all our top gear, right? We're all about it, man. Gary's the kind of guy that rolls into camp. He's got mismatched camos on from the 80s. He's got a bow that's 20 years old. He, rolls out to his stand. He throws a dip in. He's spitting all down the side of his tree, and he kills a big deer. Like, he's that guy, right? So, it's fun. I just think back to that. He's to this day, we still laugh about that. It drives me crazy. But Gary's that guy, right? He's that guy, right? I mean, you can be down just, spear fishing with tanks on for 45 minutes and come up, and Gary's the guy that'll drop off the boat with no tank and disappear for 3 or 4 minutes and come up with a giant. Like, he's just that guy, So I would say, like the bow, it's what you're comfortable with. If your comfort range is 30 yards and you can sit there and smoke them, then great. Let's see here. Talk about choosing the right gear. Man, I need my glasses. It's getting terrible. Talk about choosing the right equipment, which I can't think we have, and maintaining it for optimal performance, and then practice and shooting. Okay, so exploring the right gear, and also taking care of it for optimal performance. I think we've talked about that a bit, as far as choosing the right gear. As far as keeping things in optimal performance, I mean, the biggest thing is just take care of your gear. At the end of the season, we make sure we clean our guns before they get put in the safe. Our bows, we'll smoke them over. We'll wax the strings. We'll put a little oil here and there. We'll make sure things are good, because we've been out all season. They've gotten rained on and wet and everything else. So we just give them a good cleaning, make sure they're good. For me and Gina, for the most part, we're not really putting our stuff away for a long period of time, right? We do this for a living. And even on the Spear Life side, we even do a little bow fishing. So, I mean, we're using our gear, our gear is not per se getting stuck in a safe for 8 months or whatever. So I'd say if you're going to, put your stuff away, just clean it, make sure it's good when you pack it away. If it's a crossbow, make sure it's unloaded. It's amazing to me, with the people that we meet out on the road and seminars, and it's funny. I'll see a guy in camp and his crossbow's like loaded the whole time, without an arrow or bolt on it. And I say something, he's like, "Oh yeah, that thing's been loaded since last year." I'm like, So, just remember, like if it comes to a crossbow, just remember that, man, especially these crossbows nowadays, that is a tremendous amount of energy bound up right there. So, let's not leave it, loaded all year in the closet. Okay. I'm a big fan of unloading it pretty much daily. A lot of these new crossbows, you can unload them without shooting them. Most of the time, you get back to camp, you got a target, right? You just pop it off. That takes that pressure and all that. It releases all that energy, and it's not loaded. And let's face it, it's like anything, right? A car or whatever it is. The more you use it, the quicker it wears out. The more the more times that bow is drawn and it's having to contain that energy and shot, the more wear and tear on the bow. So, I'm a big fan of unloading my crossbow, after each hunt. So just take care of your gear. The biggest thing is, when it's time to pull it back out, it's, and look, we're shooting all year, but most people aren't, talking to, like I said, doing seminars and stuff, most of the time when we're talking to someone, it's like, oh yeah, my stuff's put up, and, about 2 weeks before the season, 30 days before the season, I get my bow out, and I get out and I shoot, make sure my stuff's on, and I'm good to go. That's okay. I mean, obviously practice is great, and we like more practice, but if that's what you're gonna do, okay, fine. To make sure your bow and shooting well, make sure your gun's shooting well. Another big issue that we've seen and learned, over the years, again, talking to fans and doing seminars, is how many people will get their bow out right 2 weeks before the season or whatever, and they're shooting field points, and they're shooting 20, 30 yards, shooting a pipe plate. Yeah, I'm good. And then, they go to the woods and they just screw on their broadhead and go hunt. I mean, well, I can tell you right now, that's a recipe for disaster. Even if you're shooting mechanicals, I mean, that it is a recipe for disaster. So, I know back in the early days when there wasn't a lot of broadhead selection, and stuff wasn't as advanced as it is now. We were shooting big fixed broadheads. I can tell you that we practiced with the broadheads we were going to hunt with. And what we would do is we would number our arrows, good ones, bad ones, couple top favorites. And then we would practice with them, and then we would number them. And then, prior to the hunt, we would sit and we would sharpen our fixed broadheads. We would sit there and just sharpen them up, make sure they're ready to go. Well, that arrow, nothing changed. We never even unscrewed a broadhead, right? So that arrow that was hitting, dead on the money, at 20, 30 yards in the backyard, we know, that it's going to be on the money in the woods. And it's, it's all hunting, gun or bow, but especially bow hunting, confidence is everything. When you get out there and you draw down on that deer, if you've got things going through your head, oh man, I was only shooting field points. Oh, I haven't shot this particular arrow. You start thinking about things, man, you're in trouble. And I can almost assure you that for the most part, if you shoot field points and you don't practice with what you're going to hunt with, and most of them come with practice arrows. Now, even fixed broadheads, mechanicals all come with practice, practice tips, right? So they'll come with practice broadheads, and that fly like they're supposed. They fly like the regular broadhead. So there's no reason now to. There's no reason to shoot your field points and just roll out and screw on a broadhead. I can almost assure you that if you shoot your field points and you go to the woods and screw on a broadhead, especially a fixed broadhead, you are almost certainly, and most of the time, you're going to be hitting a different spot. And I've even seen it with a lot of mechanicals. So, make sure you shoot what you're going to hunt with. Even if you just test a couple, like I said, back in the day, if we had a dozen arrows we were practicing with, those were the arrows we were going to hunt with. They had broadheads on them. When we were done, we were sharpening all those broadheads and getting them ready for the woods. So those are definitely some other things, I guess, related to maintaining equipment and kind of getting your quick gear out for the year and kind of prepping for your hunt. Okay. Let's see here. Practice shooting your bow and gun. I think we talked about that a lot enough. Okay. So as far as gear to the stand, just kind of in general, I'll tell you this. This is another valuable lesson that I've learned the hard way, which I've learned most of my valuable lessons in my life the hard way. And I was bad about it, especially in my early days of just the gadget man. I had everything in my tree stand with me, right? I mean, I was loaded. Like, you would not catch me on my tree stand without something. And if somebody needed something, I had it. Well, I learned the hard way. And there's another podcast where I was talking about a spot Gary Zumwalt showed me and taught me a thing about scouting fringes or train changes, and I made a comment about how I couldn't kill. I saw the biggest buck of my life and I didn't kill him. Well, the problem was I had too much stuff on, and it was cold, and that buck came in behind me, biggest buck I'd ever seen in my life, and I just couldn't get up and move and turn. I had so much junk in my stand with me. So I tried to move a little bit, and then he kind of, and I was like, that's it. There's no way I'm getting turned around. My best bet is to let him go and then see if I can get him back in. I'd actually rattled him in. Needless to say, never saw the deer again. So I learned a lesson then about bringing too much junk to my stand with me. So I would say bring what you need. If you're sitting a long time, water, snacks, for sure. we're going to make sure, depending on I'm always going to have a grunt call with me. Depending on the time of year, I'll have rattling horns with me. Again, we do a lot of all day sits. That's usually during the rut. So we've got food and snacks for the day. So, I would say, I don't have a set rule of thumb of, what you should or shouldn't have. We're hunting a lot of different places. So I can tell you, like in my bag, I've always got a bow hanger. I've always got an equipment cord. I've always got the basics because you just never know. But, so you want to make sure you're covered, but, be careful. Be careful bringing everything but the kitchen sink with you, because it can definitely cost you. So, and again, that was a lesson I learned the hard way. So I've definitely scaled back all the gadgets, but of course doing TV, we got to bring a lot of stuff with us, but, bring what you need, but just be careful not to overkill, and make sure that you can maneuver. That was another thing is, I should have gotten that stand and got situated, and okay, how easy can I stand up? How easy can I turn? And I didn't. Again, I was probably 21 years old, but I had too many clothes on. I was in this ladder stand or climb. I was in a climber actually, and it was just which again in a climber even you can get up and your climber slides and moves. So it was just I was. It's one of those deals where I was done before I started. I'm sitting there, ready, and I rattled the biggest buck of my life. Yeah, and I was done before I ever started and just didn't know it. So, when you get in to your stand, make sure that you can get up, you can maneuver, you can do things. I'll mention one last thing. When I'm bow hunting in my quiver, I carry my last arrow is always a field point, because when I shoot a buck, especially in the evening, what I do is I'll shoot him, and once that buck runs off, I try to mark where he's going and all that. But then I turn right back around, I knock that practice arrow and I shoot it in the ground exactly where that buck was standing, because right then I know exactly where that buck was. Okay. 20 minutes later, especially in the dark, oh my gosh. I mean, you don't. It's amazing how many times you get down, you're like, oh my God, I think he was here. I think he was here. You think you're going to go down and find blood right away, and you don't. Now you're walking a 30-foot circle, trying to figure out, man, where was that deer standing? You're looking back up at your stand and you're like, where was he at? I can't tell you how many times we just went like a wrong direction, because by the time we tried to trail that deer, it's like, okay, where'd he go? I'm having that arrow stuck in the ground. At least I knew right here is where he got shot. So if we don't see blood, we can look for tracks and follow tracks and blood and so forth and so on. So another little trick, picked up over the years, that might help you. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up there, and hope everyone's enjoying the podcast and maybe learning a thing or two. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up for the day. This has been Straight Talk with Jon Brunson.